My parents took my college fund to buy my sister a house. Now she's divorced, and they're asking me to pay their mortgage. I declined silently. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I've always been the backup plan in my family. I don't say that lightly. It's something I learned to accept after years of watching my parents bend over backward for my sister, Melissa. She was the golden child, the miracle daughter who could never do wrong, even when she did. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one in the corner, the kid who got told to be grateful whenever I asked for anything. I still remember sitting at the dinner table when Melissa got accepted into her first-choice college. My mom cried tears of joy, my dad opened a bottle of wine, and they toasted to her bright future. When I got accepted 2 years later, into a decent school, nothing fancy, they just nodded and said, "Good for you, honey. We'll figure something out." No celebration, no toast, just silence. That was the story of my life. Always a supporting role in someone else's movie. When Melissa wanted a car at 16, she got a shiny new Civic for safety reasons. When I asked for one, I got a used bike because exercise builds character. Every milestone she hit became a family event. Every one of mine slipped quietly into the background. Still, I kept trying to earn their pride. I worked part-time jobs, got decent grades, and stayed out of trouble. But nothing I did ever lit that spark in their eyes the way Melissa did just by existing. Deep down, I told myself that maybe my time would come. Maybe one day they'd finally see me. But I didn't realize back then that being the forgotten son wasn't an accident. It was a role I was assigned, one I'd have to fight my whole life to escape. And the real betrayal? It hadn't even started yet. When I was a kid, my dad used to brag about the college fund he started for me. He'd pat my shoulder and say, "Don't worry, son. When the time comes, your education is covered." It became this quiet promise I held on to through every part-time job, every late-night studying. Even when I felt like the afterthought of the family, that college fund was proof that maybe they cared more than they showed. So when I got accepted into my dream university, a state school with a strong engineering program, I finally felt proud. I remember holding that acceptance letter, my hands shaking, thinking this was my ticket out of the shadow I'd lived in. For once, my parents smiled. My mom hugged me and said, "We knew you'd do it, sweetheart." For a brief moment, it felt like love without conditions. Then, when tuition payments were due, things got confusing. My dad told me they were just sorting out logistics with the bank. My mom said something about helping Melissa and her husband get settled first, since they'd just bought a house. I didn't think much of it at first. Melissa always got help, and I figured they'd still make good on their promise to me. But weeks passed. Emails from the university piled up, warning me about late payments. My stomach twisted every time I saw my name in the subject line. I called my dad one night, nervous but hopeful. "Hey, Dad, do you know when the tuition money's coming through?" He sighed, long and tired. "We'll talk about it when we see you next weekend. Don't stress, okay?" But something about his tone didn't sit right. It wasn't the voice of a man reassuring his son. It was the voice of someone bracing for fallout. And I had no idea how much that next conversation would change everything. That weekend, I drove home expecting reassurance, some explanation that would clear up my anxiety. Instead, I walked straight into a conversation that would gut me. My mom was at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea like she was preparing for a funeral. My dad wouldn't meet my eyes. Melissa's photo hung on the fridge, her smiling face like a cruel reminder of who really mattered here. Dad started with a sigh. "Son, about your college fund." My stomach dropped before he even finished the sentence. He explained that there wasn't any money left. They had used it to help Melissa and her husband buy a house. He said it softly, like it was some noble sacrifice I should be proud of. "Your sister was starting a family," he added, his tone almost rehearsed. "We figured you'd understand. You're strong, independent. You'll make it work." I stared at them, waiting for a punchline that never came. "You took my college fund." "For her house?" My voice cracked somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak. Mom tried to smile through it. "Honey, she needed stability. You're still young, and loans are always an option." Think of it as helping family. Helping family. That phrase burned in my ears. Family had always meant me sacrificing while Melissa received. But this was theft dressed up as love. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly, my throat dry and chest hollow. When I left that night, I didn't say goodbye. I drove back to campus with nothing but a half tank of gas and the sound of my mom's words echoing in my head. Loans are always an option. It was in that moment I realized. Something that changed everything. I wasn't family to them. I was a resource. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car outside the dorms, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. My parents had taken the one thing that represented their faith in me and handed it to my sister like it was nothing. I wasn't angry yet, just hollow. Like all the air had been pulled out of my chest, leaving behind a silence I couldn't fill. The next morning, I walked into the financial aid office and told them I needed to apply for student loans. The woman behind the counter smiled politely, unaware that my whole world had just been rearranged. I worked out a payment plan, signed forms with shaking hands, and started looking for night shifts. That's how I ended up bagging groceries until 2 a.m. most nights while still trying to keep my grades up. It was exhausting. My friends would talk about internships and road trips while I counted tips and microwaved ramen in the back room. Every time I saw a family pulling into the store together, laughing, I felt a small ache in my chest. I wondered if Melissa ever thought about me when she looked around her new house, the house my dreams had paid for. My parents called occasionally, their voices light, as if nothing had happened. "We're proud of you," Mom would say. "You're proving you can do things on your own." It wasn't pride, it was guilt masked as encouragement. Still, I kept going. I refused to let their choices define my future. But no matter how hard I worked, a part of me kept asking the same question over and over. If I had been the one who needed help, would they have done the same for me? The answer was obvious, and it hurt more than I wanted to admit. By the time I graduated, I had built my entire life from the ground up. Every bill, every meal, every late-night study session, it was all mine. No help, no shortcuts. I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally see me for who I was. But at my graduation, Melissa stole the spotlight again. She showed up in a designer dress, flashing her wedding ring, talking about her new home office and investment plans. My parents hung on every word. When I walked across the stage, they clapped politely, then went right back to asking Melissa about her future. I kept my distance after that. We spoke on holidays, exchanged small talk, but I never brought up the fund again. It was a wound I'd learned to cover, not heal. Life was simple. Work, save, repeat. I'd built stability out of spite, and strangely, that became my peace. Then, one evening, my mom called. Her voice trembled, and for the first time in years, she didn't sound composed. "Melissa's going through a hard time," she said. "Her husband's been distant." I didn't ask for details, but over the next few months, stories started slipping out. Melissa's husband was cheating, drinking, and draining their finances. The perfect house, the dream life, it was all starting to crumble. A small, bitter part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, but all I felt was exhaustion. The same family that had drained me dry was now spiraling again, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they turned to me. I remember thinking, don't get involved, don't get dragged back in. But deep down, I already knew the call was coming, and when it finally did, it wasn't a request. It was a plea. The call came late on a Sunday night. I almost didn't answer, but when I saw Mom flashing on my screen, something in me hesitated. Her voice was fragile, like she'd been crying for hours. "Sweetheart," she started, "we need to talk about Melissa." My stomach sank. Here it was. She told me Melissa's husband had walked out, left her with mounting debts and 2 missed mortgage payments. "She's devastated," Mom said between shaky breaths. "We've been helping her cover things, but your father's retirement funds are stretched thin." I stayed silent. I could hear the sound of Melissa crying faintly in the background, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then Mom said it, the sentence that made everything click. If we lose the house, your sister will have nowhere to go. It took me a second to process it. The house. The one they bought with my college fund. The house that existed because of my lost opportunity. I asked quietly. You mean the same house you used my savings for? There was a pause. A long, heavy silence. Then my dad's voice cut in, stern but defensive. That's in the past, son. This is about family. We all need to pitch in to help Melissa. Pitch in. Help. Family. The same words they'd used to justify taking everything from me. I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice to stay calm. You're asking me to fix the consequences of your choices. My dad didn't answer. My mom just whispered, "Please, honey. You're the only one doing well right now." The call ended with her in tears and me staring at the wall, realizing that fate had a dark sense of humor. The same house that destroyed my future was now their downfall, and they wanted me to save it. The next few days were a storm of calls, texts, and guilt trips. My mom left long voicemails about how family should stand together, while my dad sent short, clipped messages asking if I'd thought about helping yet. Melissa even reached out herself, her first text in over a year. "I know things weren't always fair," she wrote, "but can we please move past that? I really need your help." I stared at her message for a long time, the words blurring on my screen. Every part of me wanted to scream. Move past that? That fund was supposed to build my future, and she used it to decorate her dream kitchen. But instead of replying, I just turned my phone face down and walked away. That didn't stop them. My mom started showing up at my apartment, just to talk. She'd sit on my couch, her voice trembling as she told stories about Melissa's bad luck. "She's not like you," she'd say softly. "You've always been strong. She's fragile. You know how hard this is for her." It was the same script they'd been reading my whole life. Melissa, the precious one. Me, the dependable one. And every word pulled me back toward the version of myself I'd fought to escape. One night, after my mom left, I stood in the dark kitchen, staring at the old family photo she'd left behind on the table. We were all smiling, but even in that picture, I wasn't really there. My arm was cut off by the frame, my smile half hidden behind Melissa's shoulder. That image burned into me. For the first time, I realized this wasn't about money. It never had been. It was about control, about keeping me in the role they built for me, the forgotten son who always gave without question. But I wasn't that person anymore, and I knew the next time they came knocking, I'd have to prove it. They didn't stop at phone calls or guilt trips this time. They showed up at my door. It was a cold, gray Saturday morning, the kind where the air feels heavy before the rain. I opened the door to see my parents standing there, both looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. My mom's eyes were red and swollen. My dad's jaw was tight, like he'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times. "We didn't know where else to go," Mom whispered. Behind them, Melissa stood near the steps, her arms crossed, face pale and distant. They came inside, uninvited but familiar, like ghosts returning to the place they'd once haunted. My mom sat on the edge of the couch, gripping her purse like it held her last ounce of dignity. "The bank's threatening foreclosure," she said. "We're 2 months behind on the mortgage. If we lose the house, Melissa will have nowhere to go. Please, sweetheart, just co-sign the refinancing loan. You make good money. It would mean so much." For a moment, the room went silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. I looked at their faces. Tired, desperate, older than I remembered. But all I could think about was the nights I'd spent scrubbing grocery floors to pay off loans I should never have had. "Why me?" I finally asked, my voice breaking. "Why is it always me who has to fix everything?" My dad frowned, his tone sharp again. "Because you're her brother. Because you're part of this family." I laughed then, quietly at first, then bitterly. "Family," I repeated. "You mean the same family that stole my future?" No one spoke. My mom cried softly into her hands. Melissa just looked away. That moment broke something inside me. Not my heart, but the last thread of obligation tying me to them. When they left, I stood by the door long after it closed, realizing I'd hit my rock bottom, Not because they betrayed me again, but because I'd finally accepted they never saw me as family to begin with. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk with my laptop open, the glow from the screen painting my room in cold blue light. The loan documents my dad had emailed me sat unread in my inbox. Every few minutes I'd hover the mouse over the attachment, then move it away again. Part of me still wanted to help, some conditioned reflex that told me being the good son was the right thing to do. But another part of me, the part that had carried every scar quietly, was done being used. Around midnight I closed my eyes and replayed the last decade, the missed opportunities, the sleepless nights, the moments I had to cheer for others while no one clapped for me. I remembered my mom's words, "You're strong, you'll make it work." They thought strength meant endless sacrifice. But real strength, I realized, was knowing when to stop bleeding for people who never offered a bandage. I opened a new email. It was short, direct. "I'm sorry, but I can't help financially. I hope you understand." I stared at the words for a long time before hitting save. I didn't send it yet. I wanted to be absolutely certain, because once I sent it, there was no turning back. The next morning, I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city wake up. The sky was gray again, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt honest. I finally sent the email. No explanations, no guilt. Just silence. It was strange how freeing it felt. Like setting down a weight I'd been carrying so long, I forgot it was there. But deep down, I knew the silence wouldn't last. People like my parents didn't let go. They retaliated, and I was about to find out just how far they'd go. The email didn't just cause a ripple, it detonated. Within hours, my phone lit up with messages. First from my mom, then my dad, then Melissa. It was like opening a floodgate of guilt and anger all at once. "After everything we've done for you, we raised you better than this. You're heartless." Melissa's message stung the most. "Wow, guess money matters more to you than family. No wonder you're alone," I didn't reply. Not to a single one. I set my phone face down and walked out of the apartment, letting the winter air sting my face until the noise in my head quieted. My silence wasn't out of pride, it was exhaustion. I'd spent my entire life explaining myself to people who never listened. This time, I chose not to explain at all. By the end of the week, the guilt campaign went public. Melissa posted vague quotes on social media about betrayal from those closest to you. Distant relatives started messaging me, asking why I wouldn't help my poor parents. One even called me ungrateful. I laughed when I read that. An ugly, bitter laugh that didn't sound like me. But then something shifted. For the first time, I didn't feel small or ashamed. I felt steady. Their words no longer pierced me the way they used to. I had finally learned that silence can be louder than any defense. Days turned into weeks. My phone stopped buzzing. The world didn't end. I went to work, went to the gym, made dinner for myself in a quiet apartment that felt more like home than the house I grew up in ever did. And for the first time in my life, peace didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like healing, but the universe wasn't finished. Because when you walk away from your past, sometimes it follows you, quietly, waiting for the right moment to remind you it still exists. Months passed. I didn't hear from them again, and honestly, I thought that was the end of it. Life moved forward. Work was steady. My apartment finally felt like mine, and for once I could breathe without waiting for someone to need something from me. Then, out of nowhere, a text from an unknown number popped up one evening. "Your parents lost the house. Thought you should know." It was from my cousin, Jake. My stomach tightened, not from guilt, but from the strange finality of it. The house. That house. The one that cost me my education, my trust, my family. Gone. I sat there for a while, staring at the message, trying to feel something, anger, satisfaction, sadness, but all I felt was quiet. A few weeks later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in my dad's neat, careful handwriting. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No excuses, no manipulation, just Honesty. "You were right," it began. "We took from you because we assumed you'd always forgive us. We thought we were helping your sister, but all we did was destroy our family. Losing the house made us see what we really lost years ago. Your respect. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're living the life we stole from you." For a long time, I just sat there, staring at his words. It wasn't redemption. It didn't undo the damage, but it was something I'd never received before. Acknowledgement. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, not as a keepsake, but as proof that even people who break you can sometimes see what they've done, when it's far too late to fix it. And yet, a strange calm settled in me. For the first time, I felt like the story might actually be over. Or at least, close enough. I never replied to the letter. I thought about it a few times, what I'd say, how I'd phrase it, but every draft ended the same way. Silence. Because, truthfully, there was nothing left to say. Some wounds don't need words. They just need distance. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding, not out of anger, but peace. I stopped checking their social media, stopped replaying old arguments in my head. I got a promotion at work, started traveling a bit, and even picked up photography again, something I'd loved before life became survival. For the first time, my future felt like mine. Not something borrowed, not something owed. Just mine. One afternoon, while cleaning my apartment, I came across the letter again. The paper had started to yellow around the edges, but I didn't throw it away. I slid it into a box with old photos and mementos, a quiet reminder of where I came from and how far I'd managed to go without them. Sometimes people think revenge means getting even, but for me, it wasn't about money or payback. It was about peace, about walking away so completely that they couldn't touch me anymore. Not with guilt, not with love, not with expectation. A few weeks ago, I heard from Jake that my parents had moved into a small rental across town. Melissa's living with a friend now, trying to figure things out. The old me would have felt pity. The new me just nodded and changed the subject, because they once took my future without hesitation. But in the end, I took back something they could never steal, my freedom. And sometimes silence isn't avoidance, it's victory.